The Senior Bowl was absolutely stacked when it comes to the wide receiver position. There were more than 10 receivers I liked down in Alabama, and making this list was tough. Before I get into my top 10 receivers from the Senior Bowl, I have one honorable mention, and I want to give the player I was most disappointed in. Let's get right into it. First up is Ryan Flournoy from Southeastern Missouri State. He made some big plays. He was a guy I wasn't too familiar with before I got down there, but now I know a lot about him. He just missed out on my top 10 and comes in as my honorable mention. My man Vil from the 3 Point Stands pod also interviewed him as well. But before I get into the top 10, I want to give you my most disappointed player from the Senior Bowl. That guy is Devontae Walker. He's a great player and he deserves to be ranked, but he simply had the worst week of any receiver down there. I hope he has a big combine because I loved his tape and I think he can play in the NFL. But his week in Mobile, Alabama did not go well. He dropped multiple passes nearly every day and then capped it off with around 3 drops during the game. It was not a good week for Tez Walker, but he's still a very talented player and his tape says he should be a second-round pick. It'll be interesting to see how his struggles in Mobile affect where he gets picked. Okay, and now without further ado, my top 10 wide receivers from the Senior Bowl. At number 10, I have Ricky Pearsall from Florida, a talented route runner with awesome hands. He had a good week. At number 9, I have Jamari Thrash from Louisville. He showcased his route running skills this week, and if it weren't for all of the quality wide receivers present, more people would surely be talking about Jamari Thrash. At number 8, I have Jacob Cowing, the closest guy to Tank Dell or Zay Flowers from last year. A little guy at 5'8", he was close to unguardable all week during practices. Cowing is a perfect sleeper fit if he falls past round 3 of the draft. At number 7, we got another slot receiver in Luke McCaffrey from Rice. He was well behind Ricky Pearsall when I got down to Mobile, and he will probably get drafted behind him too, but McCaffrey had a much better week. He gets separation, and he's a master of short yardage routes. He really caught some attention of scouts down there, and he caught almost everything thrown his way. Big week for Luke. At number 6, I have Javon Baker. This guy's electrifying. He can track the ball downfield as well as any receiver that was at the Senior Bowl. The speedster from Central Florida really had an awesome week. I wouldn't argue if someone had my top 6 rankings flipped and even had Javon up at number 1. I loved what I saw from Baker. The problem was there was just too many good receivers on hand, and the top 5 did even more to impress me. At number 5, I have Xavier Legette. He measured in at 6'1", and a lot of people were disappointed he isn't a 6'3", 6'4" guy, but to me he plays bigger than his size, and that matters. You can have a 6'4" guy play like he's 5'11". Xavier Legette might only be 6'1", but he plays like he's at least 6'3". He has a large catch radius, sticky hands, and a powerful frame. Legette looked like a value second-round pick to me in this year's stacked class of receivers. At number 4, I had the best slot receiver that was on hand in Mobile, Georgia's Ladd McConkey. This year's shaping up to be special when it comes to not only receivers, but any kind of receiver you could want, especially slot guys. McConkey's route running, footwork, and hands made him look like an instant weapon in the NFL. He might be limited to mostly playing in the slot and returning punts, but he's a weapon if he gets on the field, and whichever team lands him will get a great player. At number 3, I have the son of Hall of Famer Jerry Rice. Brendan Rice is a big, physical receiver who's a smooth mover. He came down to the Senior Bowl to showcase his speed and playmaking ability, and he did just that. Rice has been overlooked a lot in this talented class of wideouts, but he made his mark in Mobile, Alabama, and definitely caught the attention of some scouts. Look for Rice to be another solid day 2 pick. And number 2 is a guy I've always liked, but honestly, he was not one of the players I expected to blow up last week. That was Michigan's Roman Wilson. He was impossible to guard in 1v1 drills, and he caught nearly everything thrown his way. Roman made some money last week, and he's a guy who's going to be moving up draft boards for sure. But now let's get to my number 1 receiver from the Senior Bowl, a guy from a small school who wasn't the biggest or the fastest player there, but he might have proved that he's the best. Western Kentucky's Malachi Corley. Man, I love this dude. He came to the Senior Bowl to prove he's more than a running back playing wide receiver, and that he's not just a Deebo Samuel clone. He showcased his route running, footwork, speed, and hands during practices. You could tell that he put a lot of work and really cared about his route running and wanted to showcase that at the Senior Bowl. He's an explosive athlete who's a danger to score anytime he touches the ball. Malachi Corley looked like a first-round pick to me. With how stacked this class is, there is a possibility that you can get this guy in round 2, but he definitely should be moving up draft boards after his performance at the Senior Bowl. I've talked about what an amazing year it is for wide receivers already. The Senior Bowl was just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this receiver class. Other guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman, and more didn't even attend the event. This is a perfect year to need a wide receiver, and I hope Ryan Poles and the Bears take at least 2 of them once this year's draft rolls around. My time in Mobile, Alabama did nothing to suggest otherwise when it comes to this wide receiver class. They are loaded with talent, and I can't wait for this year's draft. I did want to talk a little bit more about the guys who I consider my favorites from my time in Alabama. Malachi Corley was the guy who impressed me most, but I also want to put him on my favorites list with 2 other guys, Brendan Rice and Javon Baker. I loved everything about Javon Baker, and some people are going to look at me like, oh, well, you got him number 6 on your list. And that just goes to show you how talented the wide receivers were down at the Senior Bowl. But Javon Baker is a guy that I really like, and he's going to be a guy that I really want the Bears to pick up when we get to day 2 of the NFL draft. If you can land Baker in the 3rd or 4th round, I think that would be a huge addition to this team, especially if we can add one of my top wide receivers in the 1st round as well, like a Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., or even a Keon Coleman. But the more I look at this year's wide receiver class, I want the Bears to double dip. I really like Brendan Rice as well. I also really like Tez Walker, but he just disappointed me down at the Senior Bowl. But from top to bottom, this class of wide receivers is stacked. And I'd also love to leave the draft with a slot guy. Give me a guy like Luke McCaffrey, Ricky Pearsall, or Ladd McConkey to run in the slot as well. And that's just going to make this Bears offense better. This is the perfect year to get a wide receiver, and I can't wait for the draft. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Stick around. I have a lot more content on the way. I'm recording with Glenn Morgan from NBC later on today. Please remember to hit that like button for me, and until next time, bear down.